welcome to this, the second installment of the Tejas Storytelling Association's virtual event series. I am Rick Davis, Vice President of the Tejas Storytelling Association. Our new virtual event series features performances direct from our affiliated storytelling guilds around Texas and Oklahoma. These events are being presented to you through online Zoom meetings and are being made available to the general membership of TSA as a free member benefit. And now, on with the show. The Tejas Storytelling Association and the Heart of Texas Storytelling Guild of Waco, Texas presents Oakwood Cemetery's Walking Tales, bringing historic stories to life. If you couldn't attend the Guild's Oakwood Cemetery Walking Tales live on October the 15th in Waco of this year, then you're here to see this extraordinary event through this virtual recreation. Now, please, everyone, be certain and mute your microphones during the presentation. This is being recorded and will be replayed on TSA's YouTube channel at a later date. And now, it is my distinct privilege to introduce to you the president of the Heart of Texas Storytelling Guild, Miss Vivian Rutherford.
Thank you, Rick. And I would like to take this moment to thank the Tejas Storytelling Association for this opportunity to share and highlight our guild. I want to thank also our photographers and videographer, Linnell Williams and Marc Rutherford, and particularly Marc, for putting together this meticulous compilation of Walking Tales history. I also want to thank all who started with us and have remained, and some of them who we've lost along the way. We've had those who've joined us in the last few years, and we also appreciate the collaboration of Historic Waco. And together, all hands have come together to create what we call Oakwood Cemetery's Walking Tales, bringing historic stories to life. It is our pleasure to share that with you. Thank you. Greetings and hello from the heart of Texas, Waco, Texas. I am Vivian Rutherford, a founding member and president of the Heart of Texas Storytelling Guild. We established in 2007 with the intent to be an organization where storytelling could be heard, learned, and shared. We look for ways to give and serve our community. Today, we are pleased and honored to share a snapshot of an annual occurrence that has become a favored and much anticipated event each year. In 2008, founding member Marion Flashman approached the Guild with an interesting idea. Would we be interested in telling stories at a cemetery? And before we could shoot the idea down, she went on, not talking ghost stories, and not just any cemetery, but stories from one of the most historic cemeteries in Texas, Oakwood. In it are buried Texas governors, senators, Baylor University presidents, men and women trailblazers, pioneers from early Texas, and people who have written Texas history just by their existence, such as Rose, a 2-year-old who was the first person buried in Oakwood in 1878. And we decided that we would stand by their final resting place and tell their story. We could do that our choice as first person, third person, or as a documentary. And many have chosen to dress in period clothing, which makes it quite fun and entertaining for our guests. The community is invited to come out and learn and enjoy. And there is no charge, but it is a priceless experience. Today, we invite you to witness a snapshot of Oakwood Cemetery's walking tales, bringing historic stories to life. Presented by the Heart of Texas Storytelling Guild of Waco, Texas.
We added what we call the entertainment wing. We have 2 parlors at the bottom of the and now the top is a ballroom. So we were the only house that had an actual ballroom. We threw a lot of parties. Yes.
An interesting story of my husband's grandfather. He said when they were young, they would get on their horseback and swim over to harass the girls. And he's serious.
Yes, we were the only house out there. Had a lot of land around it. Now the house is landlocked, but we had a lot of land. We had peacocks. I put peacock feathers because love peacocks. We had deer. We had a pond. We would fish in the river and then put the fish in the pond and eat them later. But we grew strawberries. We did a lot of entertainment because my husband was president of Waco National Bank. Plus, he ran all his other businesses out of the house as well. And as I said earlier, he was quite an entrepreneur. He had a part of Bell Water Company, Brazos Flour, Ice and Refrigeration, Waco Lumber, and a construction company. The suspension bridge has over 2,700,000 bricks that came from our kiln and the Trice Mason. So the towers are really, they're covered now, they're stucco, but the brick that holds them up were made by the Mann Brick Company. our monument here, my husband was always wheeling and dealing. You familiar with the castle that's on Austin Avenue? Well, the first man who started building the castle was named John Tennant, and he built several of the walls before he went busted, and then so the castle stood partially done for many years. My husband gave him a piece of our land. We have him out in Robinson called Wild Air. He gave him a piece of land for him to build a home on, and Mr. Tennant came out and built this monument.
It is Monday, isn't it?
Sure.
Well, in my world, it's Monday, and it's ladies only at the natatorium, and it's only 25 cents. So that's why I'm wearing my bathing suit, and I'm going to watch my time so that I won't be late. So I just wanted to warn you in case I dash off, I'm going to the natatorium. Now, you realize we wouldn't have the natatorium if it hadn't been for my husband, Captain Joseph Daniel. And the reason is, we had a farm about 26 in Clay, where that St. Mark's Lutheran Church is today. And we had a house there, but we needed water. We needed water for the animals and everything. So he said he'd drill a well. And the city fathers said, you can't do that. You're not gonna find any water there. Well, Joseph didn't take well to that answer. So he started drilling. He drilled for over a year. And he went down 1,835 feet, and he hit water. And the day he hit water, it was spewing up out of the ground. It was 104 degrees, like those hot tubs that y'all have now. It was hot water, and it was going, it was like 1 million gallons in 24 hours would come through there. So he was so excited, and it was very beneficial to the town of Waco, because then they started the natatorium and the hot baths. He also started the Bell Water Company because it was up on the hill. The town was down here with those city fathers that said it couldn't be done. And he made troughs out of cedar, and it would flow down into the city, and that's how Waco got their water. Now in 1900, or a little after 1900, we did sell the Bell Water Company to the city of Waco, but that's how they got their water. Now,
met with us, and she heard B.F. Hall one Sunday night say, if any of you can find sprinkling for baptism in the New Testament, I will buy you the finest Bible to be had. Well, she was indignant. And she said, I've read that passage many a time. I'm going to go home and find it, not because I want his old Bible, but just to prove he's wrong. Well, she went home and she read, and as you know, she never found that verse. But she came back and she said, I found so many things in the Bible that I'm commanded to do that I've not been doing, that I've read myself right out of the Methodist Church. And she became one of our finest members. We then moved from the Methodist Female College to the courthouse, where we met and had rough planks with props on the ends for seats and candles for lights, but people stood around the edge of the room to hear the gospel preached. We also went to the Courthouse Street School and Sam Houston Hall, which was over Jones Livery Stable, and we also met at Ritchie Hall. Once, when we were meeting at Sam Houston Hall, we invited the wife of a prominent attorney in town to come to one of our meetings. She said, I will never go to church over a stable. I think she was forgetting that our Lord and Savior was born in a stable. What will pride not do? Well, in 1875, we finally got I lived to see our first church on South 5th Street. What a time we had paying for that building. I then died on October 12th that year, 1870. The year's been knocked off the marker. The church then later moved to 11th and Washington, and now the church is out on Lakeshore Drive. Some people know us as the Pumpkin Patch Church. Now, I consider my life's greatest work to be fetching that preacher who came and officially started that congregation. Did you do the math? I was 72 years old when I made that wagon trip.
this village. At that time, it was called Waco Village. Well, my daddy, again, Shapley, he was a very famous man. Come, I'm telling the story of Kate Ross Pageant and my mama and my daddy, the Rosses. My daddy built the first hotel here. My daddy and my mama built the first log cabin here. And I was born into that cabin in 1853. My daddy was the first postmaster. He continued to work for the Texas Rangers. And he lived over there near the Brazos River. My house is no longer there, I'm sorry. But my house was built right on the river, and they gave permission for my daddy to build a ferry across the river. Now, this is before that suspension bridge was built. So my daddy built a ferry, and it went right across, right in front of our house, across to the other side. We saw lots of people. It was so exciting. In fact, my sister Mary, who's also buried here, Mary, that's how Mary met her husband. He was coming across on the ferry, and my sister Mary was looking outside, and she saw the most handsome man on that ferry. And she told me, "Oh, Mary." And she did. Well, anyway, I was the youngest one of 7 children that my mama had. And something happened when I was a little older. So my mama educated all of us children. She really believed in education until you were about 10 years old. She thought that was enough. And so she educated us. There was no school here in Waco in these parts. And then, right about then, there was something terrible that happened in our history. And my brother Sol, Ross, and my daddy, and my other brothers, they all left us at home. Me and my 2 sisters.
They would have them open. They didn't want any spirits to come out and get anybody. They would have a wake. You know what a wake is? No. And those waking nowadays, people would come the day before the service, and would visit with the family. They had their visitation in the home, in the parlor, the big fancy room, yes. And they would have them there. Now, the actual reason behind this, and it would last for about 3 or 4 days. They wanted to make sure the person was really dead, so they would not wake up. It was awake. And sometimes people did. They were in comas. And they stood up and like, okay, false alarm. But they would have that, and they have all kinds of flowers around. You know why they would have lots of flowers? Exactly. Camouflage this man. Now we do it ceremonial, but back then it was a necessity. So in 3 or 4 days out, flowers, and they would sometimes use vinegar to help with the smell. And of course they would bury. Now when they came here, this was originally a racetrack. It was a racetrack, and the cemetery on their first street, up their first cemetery was the cemetery. Yeah. Like across from there?
Yes. When it got full, of course they acquired this. And it's been run by women from the board. It's all yes. As you can see, it's very well. Yeah. Need I say more? Right. So it had, and they were thinking about naming it Rosewood, but they did not. They named it Oakwood. And ironically, there were no oaks planted at the time. I know. That came later, much later, but they named it Oakwood, which meant they thought, well, maybe we want to put some
planning ahead.
Yes.
did provide otherwise very shortly in 1873 before that election. The state legislature enacted election reform before the election and changed the place of polling from the county seat. Everybody would have to come to Waco, even if you lived in Mart or Crawford. Changed it to precincts and changed the time for polling from 4 days to 1 day. You didn't need 4 days if you could go to your own precinct. So the Constitution said in these two clauses the following. It said elections must be held in the county seat of the several counties, semicolon, and polling shall take place over 4 days. As I said, the legislature changed it. And what the Republicans argued was Mr. Rodriguez was illegally incarcerated. He couldn't have committed election fraud because it was an illegal election. Why? Because that statute passed by our legislature in 1873 was itself in violation of the Constitution. They said that the legislature had no authority to change the time and place, or at least the time for polling. What the Davis appointed Supreme Court said was this: there were two clauses in the Constitution. The first one dealt with the place, it had to be in the county seat. And in that clause it said unless otherwise provided by law, and then there was the semicolon. And the time of polling, 4 days, was on the other side of that semicolon. The court said those are two separate and independent clauses. The provision which permitted the legislature to make a change in it was to the left of the semicolon. There was no provision similar in nature to the right of the semicolon, which would have permitted the legislature to change the number of days for polling. And so the Republicans said that election was illegal and Mr. Rodriguez was unlawfully incarcerated.
Dexterous or what, but I still right-handed. So that did not take well to be fired at. So I shot him dead, and then his stupid little brother is behind me, and he starts firing. So I shot him dead too.
Principal at J.H. Hines Elementary School. First black principal to ever go to J.H. Hines. And on top of that, he was the first principal here in Waco to get a Principal of the Year award. Yes, he was in so many different organizations. I had to write something there. I just typed something up because I enjoyed what he did. He was so outgoing, and let me tell you what he would do. When he was principal, he would meet the bus every morning. He would meet the bus, talk to the children, talk to the children's sisters and brothers. He would even talk to the parents. So he knew them all. He knew them all. I said, oh, I wish that would happen now. But it's so yes. But he would talk to the parents, and he was honored in so many ways. Even not at school, but at church. He was in a lot of different organizations at church. But his wife told me that his song he loved at church was "Jesus Loves Me." This I know. I said that's the best song. But yes, he was a great scholar. He was an outstanding gentleman. He loved kids, and he loved. And he said, what was that saying? She told me they would say. She said, Mr. Barstow School, he was a very compassionate man towards the students. He loved working with the children. Mr. Barstow would meet the bus every morning. He got to know the students, sisters, and brothers, and the parents. He said he was a loving, compassionate, and devoted scholar towards his immediate family and towards his students and colleagues and everybody. And I said, that is great. Yeah, that's great. We remind people now that our children can become children.
So where's he a minister?
No, that's his father. He was in the choir.
What did he say?
He sang in the choir at church. Yes, he was a singer.
So she published 2 volumes, one during her lifetime and one that was completed before she died, but not finished and finally edited. So other people finished that part and then it was published. So there's 2 of those books. That music exists and is in that collection, and if you're a folk singer or any kind of singer and you want to, you can get the show down in there and work with them so you can use that music. You have to wear the white gloves and look. But once you find what you want, you can make limited copies so you can copy the songs you wanted to learn and play with it.
There was this little fracas down south where Texas decided it was going to country. Now we all know that that didn't last very long in theory. After all, there was the battle where Santa Ana was captured. He actually got to sit in, listen to that, and write down what Santa Ana said because he did speak Spanish. But saying the Texas Revolution only lasted half a year is not true. Mexicans kept on invading places like San Antonio, and he was part of the Somerville campaign where they went down across the border to various places. Laredo was not part of Texas. And in 7 years, his memoirs say
very generous. And so we help fund scholarships and local improvements around town. We help do some funding at Waco Hillcrest Hospital, and we put in the air conditioner at Waco Park. My friend, Mr. Stringer, was a banker, and he had advised, or suggested that we put together a foundation, and it was called the Nell and GHK Foundation. But I said, no, just not an earner money, so it would be called the GHK Foundation. I'm sorry, Mr. Nance. The Stringers were my friends. So we started.
Suddenly Slattery starts telling all the people there, I'll tell you what, brethren, one you need to look out for is someone living in your own town, this iconoclast. Man's ears perk up. He's like, you read the iconoclast? So Slattery starts talking about all this awful stuff, all these lies about how Grant's this rascal, he's gonna undermine things. And keep in mind, nobody was reading the iconoclast. Suddenly now the key speaker is referencing you? Grant's like, you read my article. You read the iconoclast. Somebody's reading the iconoclast.
I hope you've enjoyed so far that little snapshot of Oakwood Walking Tales. Of course, coming in person, I always say it's always the best when you're right there in person. Well, if you could not come to Oakwood, we brought a little bit of Oakwood to you tonight in the bodies of, oh, did I say bodies? of two of our presenters. One of them is going to share the story of Governor Pat Neff. Now, Pat Neff was a two-time governor and a senator, and he was also president of Baylor University. Well, I'll let him tell you about it.
Oh, hey there, everybody. Hi, how you doing? Good to see you. How do? Governor Neff could not be here. He's busy addressing some new arrivals to our place of rest. So he's asked me, I'm his charge d'affaires. My name is Horatio T. Wainwright. And he's asked me to come and talk about it, but he's giving me this little book right here. And you can see he's written some stuff. And he says, now, Horatio, you can only talk about these. You cannot do anything else. And specifically, no gossip, but I got some gossip I'm going to share with you. I think you'll enjoy it. But again, let me tell you a little bit about Governor Pat Morris Neff, the 28th governor of Texas. He was born in 1871 in Coryell County. He had 3 older brothers and 1 younger sister. His oldest brother, oldest brother, he died of the pneumonia. And his younger sister, oh, Miss Lizzie, they were the best of friends and playmates. And poor thing, she took the pneumonia and she was not a happy girl. And she didn't last too long, so he lost her too. Now, her other 2 brothers, oh, Ed and Sam, honey, let me tell you, they were something else. Ed and Sam run afoul of the law. Ed was not really, shall we say, convicted, but that besmirched the family name, the Neff name. But his brother Sam, oh, he fell in with some pretty rowdy people in Waco, and they decided, guess what? They was going to rob a mail train. And as you know, robbery of the mail is a federal offense. Well, he was captured. He was tried. And Mother Neff, she just sat in the courtroom and listened to all these men talk about her baby men, her boys. And all she could do was sigh, sit and sigh. Well, Sam, he got 5 years of hard labor in a penitentiary, federal penitentiary. I think it was somewhere up north, like Illinois or something like that. I don't quite remember. Excuse me. This grave dust is a bit much. Pardon me, this mausoleum. Well, anyway, so there is Pat Morris Neff. And what he did is he went to Baylor University and he got his Ars Baccalaureate. That's the fancy way of saying Bachelor of Arts. And during there, he met his future wife, Myrtle Maynard. Miss Myrtle was from Lovelady, Texas, and he called her Mert. Yeah, hey, Mert, let's go for a walk, things like that. They even took classes together, and I tell you, honey, they passed notes to each other during class. Now, I was never able to do that when I was in school, but they did. And they really liked each other, and he really, really liked Miss Mert. Well, anyway, after he graduated with his AB, his Ars Baccalaureate, he was going to go teach school. And he said, I'm going to be gone for a year. Are you going to be here? And Miss Mert says, no, I'm not coming back to school. I'm going to go back home. And he said, well, I'm going to be out of the state. I'm going to be teaching, and we're just going to have to write each other letters. So that's what they did for a whole year. They wrote back and forth and back and forth. And there was one time Miss Mert wrote him and said, Pat, I done had 3 marriage proposals. Well, he wrote her back and he says, Mert, you can make your choice of the 3 men and me. I'll support you, whatever you do. Well, we all know what happened. She chose him. She waited for him to come back, and he came back. He came back and he went back to Baylor, and he got his LLB, his Bachelor of Laws and Letters. He hung up a shingle in Waco, and it was pretty good time. You know, it wasn't all this fancy schmancy type of attorney type stuff, but he did a good job. And he was telling Miss Murdy, says, honey, I'm going to go and get my LLD so I can be an actual lawyer, my JD, my Juris Doctor. But I'm going to have to go to the University of Texas in Austin to do that. And she was, oh, well, okay, fine, do what you need to do. So he went down to the University of Texas in Austin, and he was an excellent student. It usually took 2 years for a person to go through the law program, but he did it in 1 year. And how did he do that? He put his nose to the grindstone, and he studied and studied and studied. But I tell you one thing, he would go out walking, and he walked by a place called Schultz's Garden. And, you know, it was one of those German people, you know, those German people like to drink. So he peeked in, and he was mortified. He was so mortified. He saw his classmates in there drinking after class, drinking before supper, drinking after supper, waddling their way home. But not Pat Morris Neff. He was a devout Anabaptist. Now, the Anabaptist is the big word for all the Baptist denominations. And there was no drinking, no dancing, and no card playing. And he was very devout about that. And that's why he finished his degree in 1 year. Top honors from the University of Texas Law School in Austin, Texas. Well, he moved back to Waco. I mean, naturally, he became a really well-renowned lawyer because of that. He had eloquence. He could just talk. He could talk the bark off the tree. His words, his ability to have ideas and put them out. People just love to hear this man talk. Well, because of all of that, and because of his being a pretty good lawyer, he was asked to be county attorney and a prosecutor, not just attorney, but the prosecutor for the county. And you know what he did? Out of 422 cases, he successfully prosecuted and won 402. Now, that is a pretty good track record in my book. I think you would agree with that on there. Well, it was during this time also, he said, Mert, I'm going to run for governor. And she said, okay. And this man, Pat Morris Neff, was the first governor to fly on a plane. Pat Morris Neff drove his personal vehicle 6,000 miles around Texas and visited 37 different counties. People who'd never had a politician come and talk to him. And I bet you anything that that's what won him the vote, because he was there at the people, talking to the people in places where they just had never seen a politician before. Well, he became, you know, he did pretty good. He became governor. Now, during that time, you have to remember one thing. He was governor twice, 1921 to 1925. That's because at that time, the governorship was only a 2-year term. 2-year term. One thing about Pat Neff was when he ran for governor, he had a very, very what they call Texas progressive agenda. He was a strong prohibitionist, and that's from his Anabaptist upbringing. He supported women's suffrage, and he also supported all sorts of great things that we just too many to exist, too many for me to tell you about right now, because I just have a short time. This connection to the other world is a bit hazy at times, so you have to remember that. He did reforms in education. Let's see what else. He did reforms in prisons, public health, law enforcement, and taxation. Two things he did were very, very important. He founded the Texas State Park Program. And the first Texas State Park, Mother Neff Park. Now, Mother Neff, that's Pat's mama. She donated her land for this park. You need to go by Mother Neff Park sometime when you're there. It's about 300 something acres and it's real pretty, real pretty. Twice he had to declare martial law, one in Mahia because of all the gambling and the bootlegging and the robberies and the prostitution. He had to have martial law. He put down all that stuff. And the second time he declared martial law was in Denison, Texas, during one of those railroad strikes. And if you know anything about railroad labor history, they could get pretty violent. He put that down with that martial law. Now, one thing that he was really criticized about was he did not take a strong stand against the KKK. Now, the KKK at that time was extremely big and powerful in Dallas, which you know is north of us or north of Waco, and they were starting to trickle down. He didn't take a strong stand against them, but he did say this: their official word is they're all for prohibition, and I think that's pretty good. Now, can you imagine? He only did that because they were prohibition. Well, it went on, and he was pretty good. And after 1925, he went back to being an attorney and a representative. And then he became president of Baylor University in 1932. Y'all heard of Baylor University. I know you have. And he was a strong administrator, and he was an astute financial manager. And this is the time of the Great Depression. This man single-handedly kept Baylor University open during the Depression. During this time, not only as president of Baylor University, he was also president of the Texas Baptist Convention. And he then became president of the Southern Baptist Convention. And I think that's where he probably got a lot of his finances to keep Baylor alive and keep it running and keep it going, even though he did cut faculty salaries. Oh, well, we'll have to work on that. But it became Baylor, and he kept it alive almost single-handedly through the Depression. He resigned in 1947. And he just sort of 72 years old. He resigned from being president of the Southern Baptist Convention, and he had a good life. Governor Neff died in 1952. And I tell you, friends, a year later, his precious Miss Murdy, she died in 1953. Some people think it was probably of a broken heart. But that's all I have time to tell you about, because Governor Neff wants me to go and help him talk to the people. And when I see him, I'll tell him all y'all said, hey, thank you much. Y'all be careful.
Well, thank you for all that. We've learned so much about Pat Neff and a little bit more of Waco history, but you have a little bit more to hear. We are going to be treated by a young lady by the name of Molly Adams, and she was a very distinguished entrepreneur.
I guess that's my cue now.
Yes, I'll let Molly. Hello, Molly. Would you?
Well, Molly couldn't make it, and I am so excited tonight to be able to tell y'all about Miss Molly, my friend, but we got a little bit of administrative stuff we got to take care of first. First, I need y'all all to agree that we are not going to let the truth stand in the way of a good story. And second of all, those of y'all who've sent away to get your genetic results from 23andMe, and you got it back in the mail, and it said that you might have some relatives from the reservation in Waco, I'm fixing to deliver you some bad news, and I will not be held responsible for that bad news. Okay, well, before I can tell you about Molly, I got to tell you a little bit about Waco that you may not know. Waco is on the Brazos River, and being on the Brazos River, it was very essential to the cotton industry. And it was a stop on the Chisholm Trail. So it was quite a hub here. In fact, when Waco incorporated around 1871, when they did their charter, they had a population of about 7,300. By the turn of the century, they had 2,100 residents. That made it the 6th largest city in Texas. It had cowboys and ranchers and farmers. And, with that comes a lot of industry, that cowboys and ranchers and farmers like maybe like saloons and brothels. Well, most cities try to, suppress and, stop some of those. But Waco, when they wrote their charter, put that they were going to suppress and regulate brothels. And because they had that and regulate, and the suppressing it wasn't working, they decided that they would create a legal red light district. That's right. Waco had the 2nd legal red light district in the United States. At this point, I would suggest that you guess who had the first, and I'm sure people would say Vegas or New Orleans, but you'd be wrong. It would be Omaha. Those Nebraskans, yeah. So Waco's 2nd legal red light district was called the reservation. So those of y'all with the 23andMe that says you got some ancestors on the reservation and you were hoping for some indigenous tribe relations, maybe some casino money, yeah, you're out of luck. But, excuse me. Yes, so Waco starts the red light district. And in order to be a licensed BAWD, you would go down and sign the body registry, not BODY, BAWDY. You'd put your name down and you would pay your fee. You would pay $10, and that was good for a 3 months license. Now, $10 in 1884, when the legal red light district, was about $350 today. So that meant for about $1,400 a year, you were a licensed prostitute. But that wasn't all. You also had to see a doctor twice a month for a low fee of $2. $2 then, $70 now. That would mean $140 a month, which would be close to $1,700. So between the checkups and your registration fee, for about $3,100, you would be a licensed prostitute. In addition to all of that, if you were a madam, you would have to pay for every room you had in your house and everyone working for you. You also had to pay for anyone that lived in your house who wasn't working. So this was kind of a money-making thing for the city of Waco. In fact, if you were in the body registry, you weren't allowed off the reservation. Sorry. But if you were caught off the reservation, you could be fined up to $200. Their money. That would be close to $7,000. So all in all, the reservation was making about $12,000 a year for the city of Waco. That's close to $500,000 in today's money. So it was kind of a money-making industry. And Molly Adams decided that she was going to be part of that. Molly was born Mary Capitola Adams, August 12th, 1868, in Holmes County, Ohio. Now, she moved to Waco around 1886, about 2 years after prostitution was legalized. Around 1890, she began working for Stella Nolan. Stella Nolan is, from the records we have, probably the career woman with the longest and most steady career as a madam in Waco. But Molly is the one we know the most about, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her, why we know the most about her in a minute. But Molly started working for Stella in 1890. By 1891, Molly owned her own 3-bedroom brothel. So after 1 year of working for Stella, Molly had become a madam. By 1893, 2 years later, she had a 7-room brothel. Now, one of the things about brothels in Waco is most of the houses, the madams paid rent to, shall I say, some of the more well-to-do people in Waco. They paid exorbitant rent for these houses that were not in the best neighborhoods. So Molly and Stella were the exception to the rule. They not only owned their own houses, both women at one point owned multiple houses that they rented out to other madams. But Molly was kind of the belle of the ball. Between 1889 and 1917, she reigned supreme. Excuse me. She had a house designed and built by Scott and Pearson, which was a well-known architecture firm here in Waco. If you've been to Waco, they designed what is now the Dr. Pepper Museum and First Baptist Church of Waco. They also designed Molly's house. And Molly pulled out all the stops in her house. Molly had indoor plumbing, one of the first in Waco. She was either the first or the second person in Waco to have electricity. She had 2 parlors, a dance hall, a bar, and a bell system where if you were coming to visit and you wanted a particular person to visit with, you could actually access that person directly. The other thing Molly had was a telephone. She was the second house in Waco to have a telephone. Now, one of the reasons that we know so much about Molly is she was quite litigious. There are many, many records of Molly being sued or Molly suing. In every case, Molly never lost. And I'm going to just share a little story for you, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. Molly was being sued, and she was up testifying, and excuse me, the other lawyer was asking her where the telephone was located in her house. She wouldn't answer. And he continued to ask her over and over again, and she still wouldn't answer. Her attorney said, Molly, just answer the question. Finally, the judge turned to her and said, Molly, just tell them where the phone is located in your house. And Molly turned to that judge and said, Judge, you know darn good and well where that phone is. So there's a really good reason that Molly didn't lose any cases. Molly had a wonderful reputation with people in town. In fact, if you are familiar with the epic novel, Saronia, it is believed that Lorna Lane from Madison Cooper's novel Saronia is based on Molly Adams. So I hope you get a chance. I got a whole lot of more stories about Molly. So hopefully y'all can come next year and I can fill you in on the rest of her. Oh, one last thing. If you would like your own license, if you want to drop me your address over in the chat, I'll be more than happy to mail you your own license.
Ooh. And y'all all be legal. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to David Thompson and Janice Schange that all brought this forth for you all tonight. And before we end our session, I do want to let everybody know that to hear more stories and to get more information about the TSA, to learn how to tell stories, don't y'all dare miss our festival. We're going to have a wonderful festival in March. It's called the Tejas Storytelling Festival Annual. And it's in March 2023, 9 through 12. So go ahead and mark that on your calendar now. You don't want to miss this. You're going to hear folks all the way that are coming from Ireland and our own, well, I'll go ahead and say it. We got Miss Elizabeth Ellis going to be out there, Bernadette Nason. We've got folks, oh my gosh, you do not want to miss coming to the festival. Put that on your calendar. And we're going to have a celebration of storytelling, and we call that Telebration. And we celebrate storytelling, and that's going to be on a Zoom. We'll send out the links again, but that'll be November the 19th. Put that on your calendar as well, 2 p.m. And so we look forward to seeing everyone come back. And I believe the next installment is going to come along again. I hope you all enjoyed this evening, but we will have another Zoom, so be looking out for that. Everyone, thank you all so much. We hope that we see you next year. It'll be October 21st, 2023 in Waco, Texas. Thank you again.